Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. There was a conversation online about a controversial donation of mobile desks by companies and NGOs in the Eastern Cape. On the same day that this donation was made in the Eastern Cape, the Minister of Basic Education handed over an unspecified amount of these mobile desks. This time they were branded by Macdonald to a school in the Western Cape. These desks are made by a company known as My Desk Global, a company which was founded in 2018 and is sponsored by corporations and has partnerships with the Department of Science and Innovation and the Department of Basic Education. Did you see these desks? Did you get an opportunity to see this story? What do you think about them? You know, the kids have to carry them on their backs, go home with them, come back with them. Some kids have to swim over rivers in rural areas. What do you think? There was a lot of discourse about these desks online. A lot of that discourse was critical, and there were criticisms. One user on Twitter said the following: "Guys, what the hell is happening in the Eastern Cape? Who said kids need that workout every morning all day at school? This will make kids hate schooling." Another user said, "Couldn't they give them to older kids? They look so heavy." Another said, "Always the Eastern Cape. Remember the go-go ambulances? Now it's just sitting there wasting space. Nobody used it, but they spent almost 500 million creating it." Next week, we're going to hear they built a special toilet for the kids to carry because they don't have money to build real toilets. Wena suga. And then on the McDonald's branded desks in particular, one user said the following: "This leader is naive. Did she allow a junk food chain to use her to advertise their brand to children? What's next? Coca-Cola and Cadbury?" I've come to accept that South Africa is experiencing a lack of leadership, and none of these political parties have leaders who are smart. A junk food chain is appointing an entire minister as its brand ambassador for children. Another user commenting on the McDonald's branded desks said, "Minister, you can still fix this. Tell the entrepreneur to pivot and just manufacture desks. Discontinue that McDonald's branding. Yes, they paid. They can get a McDonald's board at the school gate like other advertisers in suburban schools. The same McDonald's can sponsor backpacks for the kids. Don't use young kids as walking billboards. This is not a moral look for you and McDonald's. This is not an untenable situation. Fix this today." That's what that user said about those desks. And this whole thing got me thinking about the state of education in the Eastern Cape. And I wanted to talk to you about something deeper than the desks. Oftentimes on mainstream TV, what happens is people are competing for minutes because, you know, they've got an hour-long segment. Sometimes it's on primetime TV. They have to squeeze in a variety of things, sports. They have to squeeze in an interview, etc., etc. At the same time, the government communicators, because government has its PR operation, government has got its own communicators, they're also competing for that same amount of time. So what usually happens with these topics is they get a government official, they get an expert, they get a commentator, everyone speaks for 3 minutes. 3 minutes, there's not enough time to discuss the issue properly. And that can be the problem with mainstream TV, even when they are well-intentioned. Other times, they don't even have an intention to accurately look at stuff or to be critical of certain things, which is where YouTube becomes very valuable because we can come and have longer conversations. You can listen to this as you're driving to work, driving back from work, playing in the background in the house, and you can think about these things a little bit further, right? So let's have a deep look at the numbers, and we're going to focus on Eastern Cape because this is where these desks were mainly being directed at. We're going to focus on Eastern Cape and have a deep look at the numbers. And then we can think about what are the needs educationally in the province. Think about the budget that is coming up and if it's going to match those needs, and even think about those backpack desks a little bit more and see whether there's a problem solution gap, whether this intervention is the right type of intervention. So the Department of Basic Education has a system called the Education Facility Management System, EFMS. And this is the new system that is being used by the Department of Basic Education to capture school infrastructure information. The EFMS replaces the National Education Infrastructure Management System, which was previously used. The system allows and assists the Department of Basic Education in evaluating and monitoring the progress that has been made in the provisioning of infrastructure to schools and assists in identifying shortages or backlogs of infrastructure that is needed at schools. So the report that we want to look at, the data, looks at what is the infrastructure situation in public ordinary operational schools. And the latest data is from 2023. I'm going to post a link to the report in the video description as well. There are 22,597 schools that are in the report. Of those schools, the Eastern Cape has 5,046 schools, which represents 22% of all of the schools in South Africa. So 22% of the schools are in the Eastern Cape. It's second only to KwaZulu-Natal, which has 5,797 schools, or 25.7% of all ordinary schools in South Africa. This includes, of course, primary and high schools. I want to look at the data around the following 4 areas. Number 1, toilets. Number 2, libraries. Number 3, internet connectivity for teaching and learning. And number 4, computer centers. So let's go to the first one, which is the toilets. Toilets in schools. There is still a major problem of pit toilets in the Eastern Cape. Of the 5,046 schools, 77%, or 3,870, are using some form of pit toilet. There are 841 pit toilets, the old classical ones that you know, and then there are newer ones which are known as ventilated pit toilets, and there are 3,029 of those, and it's abbreviated in the report as VIP. You know, when I first saw that, VIP toilets, I was like, they've got 3,870 VIP toilets in the schools? Wow, that's amazing. I thought Eastern Cape has changed. I went into this assuming it was going to be something a little bit tougher to digest, but wow, VIP. Then I found out that no, man, I was wrong. I looked into it. They're not VIP toilets the way that I was thinking about in terms of very important person toilets. They are ventilated pit toilets. That is what it stands for. And that is something that brought me back to Oscar Mabuyane's reality. Oscar Mabuyane's reality, it always advertises Nando's chicken, but it delivers, you know, that rural chicken, that one that we all know. So, but they advertise Nando's, but they don't deliver that same level of chicken. So that's the situation. I think it should go without saying that a school should be a refuge for children. It should be an escape from their lived realities. A school should be a place of curiosity and belief. A school in 2024, 31 years into democracy, in the most industrialized African country, should have a flushing toilet. You know, when I think about schools, I sometimes think about franchises like KFC or Macdonald's. And my view is, when you look at KFC, McDonald's, they're able to deliver the same quality of experience, whether you're in Singapore or Soweto or Empangeni. You know, I've been fortunate to travel to a few countries. I've been to the USA, to India, to Tanzania, to Ghana, to Cameroon, Botswana, Namibia, Singapore, and Nigeria. In all of those places, the KFCs that I had an opportunity to visit were relatively the same. Whether it was in Singapore or South Africa, whether it was in India or in Cameroon, you know, it should not be difficult for a government to provide the same base level of services in every school, regardless of the location of the school. There has to be a standard. That is the South African standard of education. And it shouldn't be based on class. It shouldn't be based on location. If there's a government school, they should be the same experience. We should all know what is the toilet going to be like? What is the classroom going to be like? And unfortunately, that experience is differentiated. If you look at a school like King Edward School in Johannesburg, I've been to that school. It's an amazing school. If you go to Mapetla High School, which is in Soweto, I've been to that school. It's not in great shape. It's not in great shape. And you can see the discrepancies. And I haven't been to a rural school in a very long time. But from what I've heard and what I've seen online, they are not in great shape. And I think it should be a standard that every school should be in the same quality. I think it should be. When it comes to libraries, I think we can all agree that a school library can be the beginning of an amazing journey into knowledge and skills for a young mind. Everybody who's in universities and teaching, even in the professional trades and even in the technical trades will tell you when they fell in love with reading. Reading is such a beautiful, liberating skill. And it can be an amazing journey when you start reading your first books, whether they are fictional. Harry Potter, I remember I struggled a little bit falling into my rhythm. My mother used to force me to read all of the stuff that we were required to read. And I used to read faster to go and play outside because I figured out, hey, if I take long here, kids are playing outside. This woman is not going to let me out. So I need to read fast. And I would read fast, but I never enjoyed it. After she passed away, I kind of stopped reading for a little bit. I was 9 at the time. But when I got to grade 5, I was like, let me read. My mother used to love me reading, etc., etc. But I was struggling to find content, and it took me a bit to get back into it in a big way. But I did get back into it, and there was a library right outside the school, and I would be able to go to that library. I'd spend all of my time there. People used to come and bring me birthday presents, etc., etc. They would never be able to find me. And my grandmother would say, there's 2 places you can look for him. Go and scream his name outside on the street. If he doesn't show up, go to the library. You'll find him there. And I started, with Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Mallory Towers, Enid Blyton. Then I found some Sherlock Holmes stories that I was enjoying. And then the love came back. Catcher in the Rye was one of my early formative books that really shifted my thinking and perspectives. I think I read that in grade 6. And then my appetite grew and grew and grew. By the way, the book club is coming. It's launching. Point I'm making here is that reading is such a liberating experience. You learn skills. You learn thoughts, ideas. You get to travel to places. You get to experience things. You get to feel emotions and have experiences that you would never have to have as an individual. And you can become wiser, smarter, more tactical. I remember improving how I played chess in primary school because I got a few books on chess and I mastered some openings, sitting there with the book, working it through. Books are not just about like theory. They are practical applications. They are woodwork books. They are motor mechanics books. We need to move away from thinking about reading just as like this thing that is just for these scholars and we sending Ndlozi on a tree, talking philosophically, canonically about the epistemology. And no. It's not only that. Even a carpenter has to read and have a love for reading, right? What is the situation with libraries in the Eastern Cape? Out of the 5,046 schools, there were 340 schools with libraries. 340. Only 7%. In other words, 93% of the public schools in the Eastern Cape do not have a library. In other words, 4,692 schools in the Eastern Cape do not have libraries. I'm sure at some point, if I look deeper into this issue, I would find that the money was allocated to fix this problem. And that money ended up in the yellow thighs of Hosh Karamaimas in Sandton and Pretoria. Imali yama library in Hosh Karamaima, Gari Uli, China. Hey, that's probably what happened. The extent of corruption within the government systems is so frustrating because I'm sure it's not a secret that there are no libraries. Because 7%, you basically no libraries. I always joke about this slay queen thing, but have you noticed how the slay queens known to be dating government-linked businessmen, these entrepreneurs, have stashes of cash? And remember how they got the name? Oh, I'm so blessed. We looked into it, found out that no, they were not necessarily being blessed by Father God. It was Father Kada coming through after submitting a tender somewhere. And there have been tenders that have been proven to be problematic in the Department of Basic Education. Remember the tender that was blocked by the minister coming in, which was for a significant amount of money, 10 billion for the full school feeding program. Then we heard about another tender, which was a problematic tender, another school feeding program tender in KwaZulu-Natal. You remember? So it's jokes at some level. There's nothing wrong with being an attractive young person who loves makeup and loves having this lifestyle, which is associated with slaying. I don't have a problem with it, actually. It's just that there's that slice of people in that demographic who are associated with politicians and their issues with the way their partners get that money. To be quite honest, think about what you've seen with some of these slave queens. They are always fixing something in Turkey over there, getting new teeth, new something or the other, always traveling to Dubai, always buying new cars. Sometimes they buy 2, 3 cars in the same year. And that's money that was meant to go and build school libraries. That was money to buy Enid Blyton, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. That was the money that was meant to buy South African literature so that these kids can discover Zakes Mda and all of these other entities, Athol Fugard. That's what the money was supposed to be for. And now there's no libraries in the school, 7%. 7%. Compared to other provinces, the Eastern Cape has the lowest number of school libraries. KwaZulu-Natal is on 26%, which is still bad. The Western Cape is on 55%, which is surprising to me because this is supposed to be the best run province, the blue cheese province, the blessed province, can't do no wrong province, the Kumbaya, my lord province. Gauteng and Free State are much better with 68% of schools with libraries. But we need to be clear. All schools must have libraries. All schools must have stocked libraries. Reading as a skill is not just for some percentage of the population, for some schools. It's essential to the whole population. And when you read the diagnostic reports, the subject diagnostic reports, they talk about lack of comprehension as being one of the essential problems with the answering of exam questions. And knowing now that there are no libraries, is it surprising that kids are struggling to explain concepts when they reach matric? It shouldn't be. It's a problem. Let's go to the next one. When it comes to science labs, it was a similar picture. Only 7% of schools in the Eastern Cape had science labs. How can we expect children to fall in love with the world of science and discovery when they have no science lab? How can they learn the beauty of the scientific method when they have no labs? Workshops, labs, libraries. This is where young minds start exploring, examining, hypothesizing, exploring ideas. For skills development, kids need to work with test tubes. They need to play with flasks. They need to dissect. They need to play with all the tools. If you think about the workshops where they can learn, if they don't have them, where will they get the skills that they need and the experience with the tools that they need? Engineers, doctors, mechanics, carpenters, plumbers, scientists, designers, machinists, all work with tools. That journey is not supposed to start at university or at the vocational college. It's supposed to start in primary and high school. But if you have no labs, you've got no workshops. It's a problem. Last year, I was listening to a discussion on the radio. I just wish I could remember which channel and who was having the conversation. It was lunchtime. And the radio host was talking with someone from a TVET program. And that TVET person was stressing that there's a need for people to learn how to work with tools in order for there to be better performance in workmanship and also in the TVETs. You may not be aware of this, but TVETs have a low throughput rate. Throughput rate is the number of people who get out of the university or the program on time. And their throughput rate is 9%, 9.2% TVETs. It's really bad, and it's lower for the more technical programs. The ones with mechanics, electronics, IT, their throughput rate is lower than the 9%. So 90-something% of the students are not finishing on time and many more are dropping out. The dropout rates are higher than 60%. Those are the realities. Can you see the connection between lack of labs, workshops in the schools to the outcomes that we see in the TVETs? Because you tell kids, no, you're not good at school, you're not good at academics, go to the TVET, you'll be fine. But you haven't equipped them with the reading skills, with the tool literacy. Tool literacy in and of itself is something like proficiency. It's important. That conversation about becoming familiar with using tools, if you read the biography of Steve Jobs, you will learn that he and Steve Wozniak got exposed to technology. There's a great one by Walter Isaacson. Book club, it's coming. We need to immerse ourselves in knowledge. take that knowledge and utilize it for the emancipation and edification of the population. We need to do that. We need to do that. So Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, you'll find during their high school years, and they went to the same school, Steve Jobs was exposed to technology through various channels, which significantly influenced his career. He attended this high school with Steve Wozniak, Homestead High School. What a bad name, Homestead. Anyway, they went to Homestead High School in Cupertino, California, and it was there where they developed interest in electronics and literature, right? He met Steve Wozniak at the school, and there was a class that they went together to, right? And it was an electronics class. There was a teacher at that school called John McCullum, and he had an Electronics 1 class at Homestead High School. And that class played a pivotal role in shaping the careers of many people in the tech space, but significantly Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Some things that you may want to know about this particular program that they were running in the Electronics 1 class. It was the first of its kind at the time. It focused on electronics and providing hands-on experience with electronic components and circuits. This exposure was crucial in the early days of Silicon Valley's development as a tech hub. Now, John McCullum himself was an interesting character. He was a retired Navy pilot, and he was known for his passion in teaching and nurturing young talent. He maintained a structured yet engaging approach, which encouraged students to explore electronics in depth. If not for John McCullum, there would be no Apple computers. Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs never would have met, never would have become friends. Steve was a little bit of a free spirit. He left the program at some point. He started doing some other stuff. But Steve Wozniak was a hardcore tech guy. He was a hardcore tech guy, and he was responsible for the building of the first early computers that made Apple successful. So Steve was more marketing oriented, but he understood the technology, understood the basics. And as he grew older, he wasn't as focused on the technical details, but he had it from high school. He understood it. His dad also was a mechanic and was involved in the fixing of cars. Steve Wozniak's dad was an engineer, so they also had exposure at home. But the school was a critical component of that exposure. But for that school, they wouldn't have met. So what am I trying to put across here? What am I trying to put across? Without these opportunities, some of the most valuable companies in the world wouldn't have existed. They really wouldn't have. And if schools don't have these resources, then what are we doing? It's a dereliction of duty. It's an abdication of the responsibility of adults to prepare those children for the future. It really is. Let's look at the next one. When it comes to computer centers, of the 5,046 schools in the Eastern Cape, only 12% have computer centers. 4,471 schools in the Eastern Cape have no computer centers. When it comes to access to internet for teaching and learning, only 528 schools out of the 5,046 schools had access to internet for teaching and learning. That converts to 10.4%. It goes without saying that the popularization of the computer in the 80s changed the course of human history as much as the popular adoption of the automobile did in the early 1900s. It goes without saying that the mass adoption of artificial intelligence now is changing once again the direction of industry and learning. Artificial intelligence is now accelerating machine learning and allowing for massive developments in robotics. What this means is that every nation has to move faster to give their populations digital and technical skills. A province cannot have 10% of schools with access to internet for teaching and learning. This means that 90% of the schools cannot have access to platforms like Khan Academy, which help close gaps in learning. YouTube itself, this YouTube, or if you're coming from Twitter, this YouTube that you are now here for, anyway, or you're watching on TikTok at a later stage, I don't know, sometimes I'll post a clip on TikTok. Point is, this is a YouTube video in the main. YouTube itself is a vast trove of programs, courses. When I was trying to improve my university debating skills, I watched free lectures, and they're still online. They're still on YouTube, hosted by Harvard University. Michael Sandel has a great series called Justice. You can find it on YouTube. There are several programs that I got from Yale. Ian Shapiro has one on moral philosophy that is great. There's another one, it's on political philosophy. There's another one from Stanford, which I really enjoyed. And it's one of the startup courses, which is called How to Start a Startup. It's also CS 138B. I watched that, and it was run by this guy called Sam Altman. It's from 2015. So I watched it in 2015 because everyone was talking about startups and lean startups and all of that. And I was like, let me understand everything that is being taught here. I saw this free course from Stanford. I remember watching it then thinking, it's brilliant. Then in 2023, the same Sam Altman led the launch of ChatGPT, the 3 version that went to the public, and is CEO of the company, one of the richest people in the world right now. The point that I'm making is that these discoveries don't happen if you don't have the internet. These self-teaching moments and journeys do not happen if the corridors of digital learning are closed. They don't happen. There's something that I want to present to you now. The World Economic Forum used to rank countries on various measures of competitiveness until the COVID-19 pandemic struck. Then they changed the process. The last rankings were done in 2019. I used to keep track of these rankings because it's important to measure what matters and keep track of how others are doing to understand whether you're making reasonable progress in a reasonable time. You know, in my non-YouTube life, I've been a coach, and it's important as a coach to consistently remind young students that the aim is to make reasonable progress in reasonable time on key priorities. One of the metrics that is measured in the World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index is skills of the workforce and skills of the future workforce. South Africa ranked in 2019 62nd overall, which was a very impressive result, but there were some discrepancies. One of the discrepancies was in the skills ranking, the skills pillar, where South Africa ranked 90th. Going deeper into that skills ranking, you see the following. The quality of vocational training, South Africa was scored or ranked 119th out of 141. Digital skills in the population, South Africa was ranked 126th out of 141. Critical thinking in education, South Africa was ranked 95th out of 141. Skills of the future workforce, 107 out of 141. Pupil to teacher ratio in primary schools, 109 out of 141. Very far from the overall 62 ranking. This data shows something. The kids are not the problem. The kids are not the problem. The problem is the political leadership in education in South Africa. The data shows when you do not put libraries, labs, access to internet in schools, when you don't have enough teachers in the primary school, the nation will not be able to produce the sufficient skills that are necessary to provide services to the whole population. This is why, in part, there's a shortage of doctors, engineers, plumbers, electricians, shortage. Everywhere we're saying there's a shortage. Why don't they fix the potholes? Why all of those things need manpower, skilled manpower. It doesn't fall from the sky like rain. It comes out of the universities and TVETs. It comes with process, with attention to what you give kids in the schools. If you don't put libraries, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Let's go back to the school desks issue. Really, this desk issue, this mobile desk on a backpack, it does solve a problem. There's a shortage of school desks. There really is. Desks get broken, etc., etc. But it doesn't solve enough of the problem because it's only 5 schools that they gave this to out of 5,046. If you think about it, are they going to get corporations to spend for the next 5,041 schools in the Eastern Cape? So this is perhaps not the most efficient solution to the problem. Relying on donations and donors to provide desks to school children is not the way. It has to come through the budget. It has to come through the budget. And the other thing I want to discuss is that there are bigger challenges, as you can see, with basic education in the Eastern Cape than the desks. The desks are part of it. But there are much bigger challenges. They are, that the minister must address. These tables going around, dropping off tables, for kids and smiling and just going, ooh, kisono waiti. These children, now that at least they have got some desks that they can. Ay. Ministers should not be operating like this. They have to be solving problems at scale. The tables, these mobile desks, they allow for a cheap and cosmetic public relations win without dealing with the deeper challenges. They allow the minister to claim to be working, to have positive media moments and hits, and their PR person can say, look at how many hits you got, look at how many articles, your name is becoming more recognizable, etc., etc. Likability. Oh, you like the kids, you care about the kids, that's sweet, that's nice. So they allow a minister to claim to be working, but the real problems, as you can see, are not being even tickled. They're not even giggling because they're not being tickled. Forget being threatened, intimidated with destruction. The problems are well and healthy. They have bigger mkhabas than some of the mkhabarest people within the parties of politics that you've seen there in government. Gwede Mantashe is one of the big nice ones there. The problems in the Eastern Cape with education have a bigger mkhaba than him. That's how comfortable those problems are. They are relaxed in their permanence because they don't see any politicians coming to solve them. They don't. And I want to close off by this. It's food for thought. I wonder what you think about it. There's something ironic about a company like Macdonald's, which used to belong to President Cyril Ramaphosa. He sold it in 2016 to a UAE company. I haven't been able to locate the details about the owners, and on their website, I can't see any information about McDonald's. So there's the story maybe for another day about who really still owns McDonald's. But let's just work with version 1. There's something ironic about a company that was owned by the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, a billionaire, McDonald's, donating desks to the schools that the president of the country is supposed to be fixing through his ministers. There's something ironic about that. Something ironic about that. You sell McDonald's to fix, in part, the schools of South Africa. And then 7 years later into your administration, McDonald's looks and says, at least let's give them a few desks so that at least kids can have desks. But what about dropouts? What about AI? What about libraries? What about toilets? It's food for thought. Food for thought. Where do you think? Where do you stand on this topic? Did you see these desks? What do you think about them? Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.